Writing your name in the history books isn't always a good thing. Here are some of the most embarrassing records in UFC history. Quickest defeat: Ben Askren. Kicking things off with a bang, a flying knee that brought a most memorable rivalry to a violent end. It was 2019, and as per usual, Ben Askren was poking the bear that was his opponent, Gamebred. As far as the funky one is concerned, the fight begins as soon as he gets a microphone in front of his face. Unfortunately for him, the former street fighter turned MMA assassin Jorge Masvidal took Askren's insults very personally. Masvidal seemed intent on embarrassing the wrestler when the time came to fight. The stage was set, and tensions were at an all-time high, and these top 10 170-pounders were itching to get their hands on one another. Finally stepping into the ring, Jorge knew that Askren was going to shoot for the legs. So when the fight began, Jorge timed a perfectly executed flying knee. Did you see that? Masvidal shut his rival's lights out in just 5 seconds, the quickest KO defeat in UFC history. One moment of madness: Petr Yan. Even the greatest make mistakes. If you know Petr Yan, you know he's a supercomputer of fighting mastery. Problem is, one moment of madness left him without the gold strap to prove it. At UFC 259, Aljamain Sterling was a tough but relatively straightforward assignment for former champion Yan. For the first 3 rounds, the 135-pound king was beating Sterling wherever the fight took place, through a combination of precise striking, elite fight IQ, and some surprisingly slick takedowns to boot. But in the 4th round, things took a turn for the surreal. Some mistakes are forgivable, others are truly mean-spirited. But to say that Yan made a baffling day 1 error would be putting it lightly. Up on the judges' scorecards and running away with the fight's momentum, Yan decided to fire off a blatant illegal knee to the grounded Sterling, hurting him badly enough that they needed to stop the fight. A new champion was crowned, making Petr Yan the first champion in UFC history to lose his belt by way of disqualification. UFC 214, Woodley vs. Maia. Few 5-round contests can compete with the benchmark for terribleness that was UFC 214. When a fight utterly fails to live up to expectations, it leaves you feeling empty inside. But to Tyron Woodley's credit, it wasn't his fault. He was faced with Demian Maia's single-minded desire to get the fight to the mat. Maia wanted this fight on the mat so he could go to work with his world-class Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But Woodley was one of the meanest anti-wrestlers in the game. Defending takedown after takedown, he managed to stuff all 21 of the Brazilian's attempts. Some might say a great night at the office defensively. Unfortunately, his own offense left a lot to be desired. Between the pair, they threw just 262 strikes, landing just 85 in total. Statistically speaking, this was the lowest volume ever thrown over 5 rounds in UFC history. A shocking decline: BJ Penn. Even a generational athlete can struggle to sustain performance. For former lightweight and welterweight champion BJ Penn, his fall from grace was nearly as unique as the sheer mastery of his best years. Between 2001 and 2010, we watched in awe as the prodigy carved his way through some of the greatest 155 and 170-pound fighters of his era, earning belts across each weight division and establishing himself as a star in the process. But Penn's motivation to train and improve concerned his fans. When he began to slip up in the cage, things got ugly fast. This wasn't just one unfortunate moment or slip-up. The great BJ Penn went on a campaign of awfulness that lasted 9 years. Fight after fight, we watched as each passing defeat began to sap at his stellar legacy. He lost to fighters he would have easily handled in his prime. By the time he left the UFC in 2019, he had lost 7 in a row, a new record for the promotion, and a miserable end to an otherwise exemplary run. An ugly record: Jeremy Stephens. Okay, look, just because Jeremy Stephens holds the record for the most losses in UFC history, it doesn't necessarily make him a bad fighter. In fact, few would argue that Stephens hasn't been a very strong member of the UFC's roster. Sure, he was never a world beater, but in moments, this hard-handed veteran showed himself to have real quality. He's scored 15 wins in the octagon over names like Rafael dos Anjos, Gilbert Melendez, and Renan Barão. Though most will know him for getting owned by Conor McGregor in a press conference, Stephens remains a well-liked figure in MMA circles. With a schedule packed with big name after big name, Stephens struggled for consistency, dropping many crucial fights over the years. As things stand, his 18 UFC losses is the promotional record, and as good as Lil Heathen is on his best day, it's not exactly kind on the eyes. Nightmare situation: Irony in combat sports usually comes with some pretty devastating results. Though Chris Weidman closed off his rivalry with Anderson Silva following the most infamous leg break in MMA history, fate was about to deal him a truly awful hand. Facing Uriah Hall in the hopes of revitalizing his middleweight fortunes, the stage was set for one of these guys to make an almighty statement. When things began, it took just 17 seconds for the bout to be declared a TKO victory for Hall. But it was no punch or kick that forced the stoppage. Just like his great rival Silva before him, a checked leg kick caused Weidman's leg to give out, snapping completely underneath him. To this day, his future in the sport is completely up in the air. And with that, Chris Weidman suffered the quickest injury loss in the history of the UFC. Your own worst enemy. Get ready for this one, because it's unlike anything you'll ever see inside the octagon. In 2007, the former Ultimate Fighter rivals Gray Maynard and Rob Emerson were set to make their respective UFC debuts. The fight itself may not have been anything special, but when the finish came, something very strange happened. Maynard scooped up his opponent into the air and slammed him down to the canvas. The slam was so powerful, he successfully knocked Emerson out in the process. The problem was, he slammed Emerson so hard, Maynard himself also went out, though he tried to deny it in his extremely awkward post-fight interview. The bout was declared a no contest by way of, wait for it, double slam KO. First time for everything. Is there anything worse than a tough loss inside the octagon? One that truly showcases your limitations? Well, as it turns out, there is. Justine Kish was in some pretty impressive form, winning 6 straight to solidify her position in the UFC strawweight ranks. However, when she ran into Felice Herrig, things took a very odd turn. The fight itself was more or less what you'd expect, but during a grappling exchange, Kish soiled herself and some of the octagon mid-fight. Well, that stinks, and it was the only time it happened in UFC history. Coming in heavy, William Knight. A few pounds can make a serious difference in the cage. For William Knight, he took each and every ounce he could get. Now, in fairness to Knight, this matchup was taken on short notice. He had never once missed weight in his career up until that point. But as a decent, not outstanding fighter, he clearly saw the matchup with Grishin and liked it, more than he fancied his chances of making the light heavyweight limit. Sure enough, when the time came to step on the scales, how do we put this? He made a total mess of it. Coming in at 218 pounds, Knight managed to fall short of his goal by a whopping 12 pounds, losing the fight on the scorecards while earning an undesirable place in history for his troubles. An enemy of the scales, John Lineker. As we learned from William Knight, sometimes fighters mess up. Sometimes missing weight will give an athlete that push into a new division. Then there's John Lineker, a guy who makes you wonder just how committed to the process he is. During his time in the UFC, he was a pretty electric attraction, a fighter who could always be counted on to bring a high-octane thriller. The fans loved him for his attitude and pure grit, even though he couldn't really be trusted to make weight. And man, 5 separate weight misses across 2 different weight classes. This became a real problem for Dana White and his team. And given that he holds the UFC record in this department, it should come as no surprise that the promotion cut him in 2019. Dead on arrival, Thomas Ramirez. Fighters spend a lifetime working for a moment of glory on the biggest stage imaginable. So when the world's premier MMA promotion comes a-knockin', you better be prepared. Unfortunately, getting the call is by no means a guarantee of success. For Thomas Ramirez, things honestly could not have gone any worse. They say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And debuting against the legendary Don Frye, the 410-pound monster was taught a very harsh lesson on the levels that exist within the octagon. With the future champion Frye in front of him, Ramirez's ill-fated UFC career came to a brutal end by way of knockout in just 8 short seconds, marking his first and last appearance in both the UFC and the sport of MMA.